Hey everybody, Breakthrough Health and Life Coach Glenn Hattem here. I'm here with my good friend Olivier Severin. Say hi to everybody.
Hey everybody, nice to meet you all.
Yep, and everybody out in virtual land. Today's conversation, I'm hanging out with a buddy of mine from high school. Gosh, and actually we were like, it's been like 25 years. I'm like, I think it's actually been like 30.
Yeah, I'm not going to date myself, but yes, it's been a few decades.
Yeah, so which means we're both young at heart still. The conversation today, I reached out to Olivier because I thought, he's just someone that, as a lot of us, we watch friends, through social media context, go through different evolutionary cycles throughout the years. I've watched you go from, the single career focus, following your father's path to getting married, having kids, and dealing with the rigors and challenges of life and losses. And I thought it'd be a really potent conversation today for our audience, where we just get to dive a little bit deeper into what goes on behind the scenes of being successful, productive, getting shit to happen, making things, making life your board for how you wish to play. But at the same time, life has some other intentions for you, other directions to shape and shift you and meld you into or help remind you of who you really are and what you're being called forth to be in this life for. And it's kind of a no nonsense process that we all get kind of made through, meaning that we kind of we have these, I like to refer to as spankings that come along in life and say, I know you think you're going this way and this is what you have intention for, but life has something more grand, more vast, more complicated. And in fact, maybe it's more of a simplification process, as I found as I move into the elder phase of life, that life really wants you to remove all nonsense, all BS, to move into the next chapter of life. And maybe today's conversation, though it might steer us in the direction of business, sharing a lot about what you're finding out now with having young ones in your life and passing the torch, so to speak, and having to go, gosh, now I see what my parents,
wasn't as easy as I thought.
Like maybe we were just, thinking back to us in high school, we were a bit mischievous. And maybe I was more, but about it. But we, we're all at some point or another along our path, we wake up to where we're getting in the way of ourselves and what nonsense needs to go, what wisdom we want to impart in the people that we get an opportunity to impact in our lives, whether it's coworkers or family members or people we get to counsel. How can we be better human beings? How can we be more soulful and more felt through our showing up with our full presence versus getting lodged in some type of heady way of navigating life, of must and shoulds, that when we can become released from that, where we get to a place where we understand that the vessel we are is about love. It's about sharing this pure, clean energy that's just supportive of life. And maybe Olivier, share a little bit about what you're up to in the world these days. And then what I like to do is I like to time travel back in time to kind of what type of individual were you growing up? What was your perspective on life? And we'll visit there and kind of work our way back up to today, and share some nuggets of wisdom along that journey that's been uniquely yours, but a lot of our audience can relate to. So.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll probably start with when I started this company. It's called Severin Group, which is interior architecture, interior design. We started in the end of 2017, and I came off from working with a private development and property management company for the last 5 years before that. And then we'll talk about that later, how I got into that whole business. But basically the end of 17 is when we started Severin Group, and it was just me up in the loft in our house. And at that point, I had made the decision to kind of start my own business again. And it was kind of one of those fun times with, we had just had our first son, Lucas, and 5 months later, I'm now starting this new business. My wife's in tech. And it's kind of like, do I make the call on, going out and doing this again on my own? And my entire life, as you knew, was like entrepreneur. I always did my own thing. I always worked for myself. And this job that I had right before this starting this company was the only time I ever worked for someone else that I didn't know outside of a family business, which was a great learning curve and understanding how they operate and everything else, which got me into what I'm doing now. But I always had this knack in the back of my head going, I'm going to start my own business again. I've got to get into it because I like the creative freedom. And I also wanted to create something as a legacy to my family and the kids, that whether or not they want to take it over at the end of the day, or if, it's just there to help with things in the family. But essentially I had this nagging thing that I really needed to get back into the market and kind of see what I can actually do and develop myself. So that started the business, out of the loft in the house. Started out with doing one project. I was wondering, am I going to get any business? 2 days after starting, friends of mine that I met and colleagues from the previous business, they're a big architecture firm. They needed help with designing a hotel overseas in China, but they didn't know how to design a hotel, which I did. And so I designed the hotel for them. And that's what kind of kickstarted the whole process. And then from there, it just kind of grew, the first year and a half I was on my own. And then my right hand, Parnaz, joined me. And the two of us worked in our loft in the house up until 2020, when we moved into this office space. And then 2 weeks after we moved in and spent all this money setting everything up, COVID hit, and then there was a shutdown. And so that was fun. You just kind of move into this office space thinking everything's going to be great. Then the entire world collapsed and shut down. And then we had 3 developers completely separate from each other call us and tell us, hey, we're canceling all projects. So that was a massive financial hit for us because, and it was within a 2-hour span. It's like literally they all called each other and said, hey, let's make his day really bad. And they just all called at the exact same time. And so we're sitting here scratching our heads going, well, this sucks. And luckily we had enough large corporate clients to where we were able to kind of get through the first 2 months. I mean, it was like down to a point where we had like 5,000 in the bank account. And I'm like, how do I make it past this month? And then the same, we got through that month. And then the second month, same process, 3,000 bank. And then we finally got enough to pay the payroll at the end of the day. And we got through those 2 months. And after that, it actually kind of took off. And then all the companies kind of, I think they made a decision. Some companies like, all right, we'll hold off all capital expenditure for like a year. And then the other one's like, oh, we're going to keep trucking. And so luckily, what was surprising to us, and I guess part of the luck and also the drive, was to basically, we actually grew really well during the pandemic. We found a niche, we got into a lot of multifamily design. So I kind of steered away from the hospitality. Hospitality dies every time recession or anything in the market touches. And that's what I learned over the last 30 years in hotels, is that they can't survive during economic downturns or shifts in the market. Whereas multifamily and mixed use commercial kind of stuff fare much better and do quite well. So, and the cool thing with what we noticed in multifamily was that they're looking for hospitality designers. So we have a lot of the hotel background, naturally parlayed into multifamily, and that's where we found our niche, and we did really well in that. And so since 2017, so it was just me for the first year and a half, then Parnaz joined for a year, and then we had 3 people by 2019, 20, and then 21 we had five or 6 people, and now we're approaching close to maybe 10 people. So it's growing, and then trying to figure out how do we grow, and these are kind of the lessons that we're trying to figure out as we grow. And so like this last 6 months to a year, we decided to go national. So originally we were in California, Colorado, Seattle, PNW, Pacific Northwest. And then we started doing some projects in Texas. And so then all of a sudden, one of our national clients was like, well, would you be interested in doing anything in East Coast, like Georgia? I'm like, sure, why not? It's still a lot less travel than I used to do in hotels, which was overseas all the time. And so when we opened the door to national, the East Coast was just booming. Through COVID and all that, it was kind of like, well, we don't care. We're just going to keep building. And so that actually opened us up to a lot of growth. But
Yeah,
also
well, California was taking the hit.
yeah, and California's pausing and doing all that. And so the interesting part of all of that was just like, how do you grow and how do you do it in a way that makes sense? So it's like the growing pains, right? So it's any new business when you're growing, it's like, it's great to have the business, but then how do you build the infrastructure to support it, that you don't lose your head, and you could easily go bankrupt in 2 seconds too if you make the wrong calls. So
I know
it's
that
kind of
feeling.
like, what's that?
I know that feeling. Yeah, just with my
Yeah,
business,
and so
even my business too, as well. Just with having to restructuring and trying to figure out, okay, what's the scalable model here?
Right.
So we have these particular clients, but
Yeah.
in grand scheme, and
Yeah.
then you're having to do this with, gosh, we can't really intelligently steer this direction based on what we just experienced with COVID. So
Yeah,
we gotta
exactly.
we gotta listen.
And the big part, when I started this business was that I wanted to make sure that I only picked up clients I liked. With the hotel business and previous, the family business, you just you have to take who wants something, who wants a job, and you just have to deal with the personalities that they're working with. And so I decided when I start my new business is that I only work with clients I really like and appreciate and respect. And then it makes it a lot more fun to work with them. And then it feels like you're really kind of working with family, even though these are very large corporations. It just became kind of like a philosophy to just only work with people that you really like working with, and only hire people that you really like. And the number one driving factor on anyone we kind of hire is just, do I trust them? And is that feeling mutual? Because I'm a open book. So when I hire someone and I talk to them, I'm like, this is who I am and this is how I am, and I'm not going to change. I'm not going to sell you something that's not actually going to happen. And that's the kind of the reality of how I like to run things, is just like, we're open, here's what it is, and you understand everything, so you're not surprised. And this is kind of what we expect from you. And I don't want to have any like bad apples or anything nefarious going on. So I like open book, just honest people that just have a talent for design and want to kind of go down the same fun roller coaster that we're going down. And so we've built a really cool, tight-knit group from that. And so we have a lot of, the majority is full-time employees. We have a couple contract, and we have some overseas work that help us in some production stuff, which has been an interesting thing to navigate when you're growing a business, is figuring out how much you bring in, how much you do contract-wise, because that limits your liability also. And like, if you have to cut bait real quick because the client cuts out or something stops, and you can stop those contracts right away, but employees is very different. So figuring out that fine balance has been a challenge. And then the other thing, when you start business, you're everything, right? So your marketing, your operations, your accounting, your payable, your everything. And so the first thing I was trying to figure out is like, okay, how do I get accounting off my shoulders? Because it was taking a lot of time to do invoicing, all that kind of stuff. So eventually, when we got into it about a year ago, we started now working with third-party accounting firm. So they took off some of the workload from me. I'm still reviewing everything and all that, but it took off a tremendous amount of pressure on kind of doing that and making sure that we're still maintaining compliance and all that kind of stuff. And then again, doing third-party HR now. So now we have someone that handles our hiring and our handbooks and training and all that kind of stuff, and compliance issues, because now we're in this new world of remote work, right? And it used to be everyone had to be in the office and you're here, but this whole shutdown has been a massive beta test on working from home. And what it did for us is that it opened up the window to more talent. And we're able to work with people who are actually now used to working from home and saying, okay, I can actually do this. I don't need to come into an office. I don't need to do this and that. And every once in a while they can come into the office and we can, powwow and have design review meetings and all that. But we do that daily.
And what are the unexpected, challenges that came about with this new type of, you have a new type of leadership working with people that are wanting to work remote, and there's advantages to that. There are also new challenges that were maybe unanticipated. So
I think the biggest unanticipated, there's a lot of great things that can happen from that. And it comes back again to making sure you can trust people, that they're actually going to do the work and use the hours that they want. And I tell my guys, I said, look, I don't care if you split up your day and you don't work so many hours during the middle of the day and then you catch up with it at night. As long as the deadlines are met and that you're attending meetings when we have designated meetings, then the rest of the time I trust you to be professional enough to manage your own time and get those deliveries. So it gives them the flexibility of being human. So if they need to go for a walk, or they need to take care of their kids, or they got to go walk their dog, or take them to the vet, or go to the doctor visit, I'm not micromanaging them. I mean, that's the worst thing anybody wants is having someone micromanage, and it doesn't make it a healthy environment for anyone to kind of want to be in that team.
Which we both have, have come from that generation when that was like the standard operating system. That was the way of doing things, and there was something wrong about it.
Yeah, I'm kind of that old school, like where you join on and you say, look, I'm just going to work for you till I die, and then after I die, you can do whatever you want. Now it's quite different. Everyone wants this completely different kind of environment where they have a lot of time off, they have balance. And I think it's important to have mental health days, and that if they have an issue going on, I want to make sure that they can approach us and say, okay, hey, I've got this thing going on. Do you care if I do this? And I'm always like, if it's something like that, I'm like, do it. Do what you need to do. Get to a healthy state, and then we'll continue on from there. A project's always going to be there. Deadline's always going to be there, but your health
and really taking care of your people. And I guess so it's become significant enough that having a culture of transparency and a place where it's safe, communicate what's really going on, like, hey, I'm stuck on this project, or I'm like, we're not going to meet the deadline, or maybe this is, hey, my input is like, maybe we're doing a disservice to the customer here, maybe there's a different direction we can go with this, what you're learning. So everyone's got a stake.
Yeah. And even we have, a couple guys who, they joined us because either they started their own business before and it just didn't work out, or they thought about starting their own business. And I tell them, look, I'm totally fine with you working with us. And then if you want to branch off and do your own business and you learn something from us, that's great. It's like, I don't want them to feel like, oh, I'm not going to teach anything now because of all this. In fact, we have one guy right now who's a talented designer, and he's always thought about doing his own thing. And he's like, well, maybe I'll move to this other state where I wanted to go, and then do like residential design. And I said, hey, that's great and all, but just, here's some business for you to understand. Like, single family residential is great. And this is just kind of me explaining some business aspects of it. It's like, the hard part about business is, where do you get your clients? Where do you make your cash flow from? All that kind of stuff that you have to think about. So with single family, the reason why we decided not to do a push on single family was that every time you finish a project, guess what you have to do? Find a new client. You have to find someone new to do another house with. So we went multifamily and picking large corporations, REITs, or the ones that have billions of dollars of cash flow to where they want to do multiple projects. Now, when we finish a project, they've got 12 others following right after that. It's the same client. And so you're not having to bang your head against the wall to regain new clients. You have this tight pool of large clients that have a large portfolio of work. Now, provided you keep delivering high quality creative design, and we bring in, a bunch of other stuff included, like project management in the construction side. We do CapEx analysis, it's capital expenditure. We work with them, their asset management teams, and everyone to figure out like what's the budget before they acquire a property, during construction process. So there's a lot more that we do than a typical design firm does. And because we do these extra things, which was kind of ingrained with me, with my dad, who's always delivering something extra, it's put us above a lot of other design firms to where we alleviate the weight of project management that a lot of these companies, project managers have on their shoulders. So like one project manager, like a regional manager, might have 15 or 20 properties that they're overseeing. And if we're doing a renovation project, that's a lot of people that they have to manage. So now if they give us a project and we say, look, it's almost turnkey, we can manage this entire thing. We'll send you update emails weekly or bi-weekly or whatever you need to say what's going on, and we touch in all the time. It takes off hours off their week per project. And so for that, we found a niche, and that came from me working behind on their side, on the development and project management company side, understanding where the pains were. And I took that and adapted that into our design, because I know what they go through. I know the process they go through and how they arrive at decisions and what to do, and also how they analyze design firms, which ones they like to use, which ones they don't. And I kind of implemented all that learning that I had with my employer before. and brought that into our design philosophy now, so we can make it easier for them, and it makes us better as a design firm for them. It's just finding that edge. But I think it was just critical, kind of explaining to one of our designers that, like, if you're going to go on your own route, just make sure it's not painful, that you think about the type of product you want to design, but then think about what happens after that project's done. How much more work do you have to get now or do to get another client and chase that? Because the biggest thing is as an owner, what I basically say is, you don't have staff, you work for your staff. There's no reason for your staff to want to or need to stick around. You have to work for them, and you have to provide them a place that they're excited to be in, that they're compensated for, that they have area to grow in. If you don't have any of those kinds of things, there's no reason for them to stick around. There's no allegiance. It's not like they have ownership in the company. They're not doing any of these kinds of things. And you can't assume that, oh, you know what, if it goes great, yeah, here you go. But if it goes bad, I'm going to charge you guys for all the debt we have. It doesn't work that way. It's, you make the decision to start your own company. At the end of the day, is to bring in the talent and the people you need. You got to work for them, and you got to listen to them, and you got to see what their pain points are. How can you alleviate them, and how can you make the stress better? Like, we have weekly calls, and we go through constantly discussions on how do we increase efficiencies in the company. And I listen, and it's important that I understand where those efficiencies need to happen. So we're implementing a whole bunch of changes right now, just to even on like our software systems, and how do we do design to make things faster and easier for them so they can actually be more creative.
So this is very different from the old school mentality of like, hey, this is the operating system we've been using, make it work, versus like, if we want to continue to have, like, in this day and age of developing a culture for your business, we're actually wanting to create an experience for the people that work for us. We care about the experience when they come to work. This is like you said, even the individual that comes in, it's like, hey, maybe you're going to work with us for a while. You're going to learn a bunch. We don't own you, and we're here to just maybe give you wings to the next place you're going. In fact, for most of you, we're all going to continue to grow and expand in different ways. So it's an opportunity for someone to go, thank God I'm working here and learning what I'm learning here. And they really listen and care about the experience that we have behind the scenes, which obviously carries over to the experience customer has.
Yeah. And it depends on what the person's looking for. Like, we may not be able to compensate like the big firms. Like, you have some firms that just have $1 billion in revenue, and of course they're going to pay their guys. Well, not all of them, but some of them can pay more. But then at that point, it comes back to culture. So you may see some people leave, and then they try this experience, and then they end up coming right back. And some of the guys, I'd say like 2 or 3 of the guys from our company, came from places where the culture was bad. The owner sold them a bad bag, said, oh, I'm going to be, your best friend, your mentor, this, that. And they ended up just slave driving them and just making horrible work environment, saying, why didn't you change this? And and there's yelling, and there's, all this kind of stuff. And it's completely opposite of what they sold them. And so they left because of the culture. And it wasn't because of the compensation. The compensation was fine. It was just the culture was horrible, and it's not a place you want to be. So now they leave us to somewhere else that is of this compensation, whether they go to a place where they say, look, you're just a number, we don't care, you're completely replaceable at any time. And then maybe they say, okay, I don't like that, and they came back. And so we saw a lot of that, not in this company, but in my previous companies, we saw a lot of that kind of process that people go through. And it's nothing negative against them, they're just trying to improve their lives. And so you can't hold that against anybody just to want to try different things. And I mean, that's how you grow. And that's also when you don't know what you have until you lose it, and so once you go through that experience, and the biggest thing that I admit to everybody in my company is, I don't know anything. I know certain things that I'm good at, and I know certain things here and there that I'm dangerous enough to understand everything.
Yep.
But I hire you guys to fill those gaps and be the subject matter experts in those areas. And that's why I bring you in. I'm all about hiring people that's smarter than me to figure out where we need to go and what we need to do to get to that next level. And, whatever it takes, the investment is worth investing in your people and your technology and your infrastructure. A couple of the guys were asking me, well, if we're doing well here and there, why don't we just, like buy these kind of like toys or this and that? I'm like, it's not about me getting a new car. It's really about this can turn on a dime. And then all of a sudden, all that money that we just spent on stupid things is now needed to operate. So we need to make sure, my gauge of success in a company is, if all things went sideways, can we continue to operate for a year without any influx of cash? And for me, that's that safety and being able to hold people on and keep them in their jobs because they went through us during the hard times. That's the least I can do, is to keep that going and then find the opportunities for investment and do different things during that time. So I'm telling these guys all these things because it's not that I'm like, it's about training and kind of teaching people my philosophy. And it's like, I've been through the ups and the downs, lots of money and then no money and up, all that kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, it just comes down to what I've learned. And my experience of what I've learned is that it can change on a dime, and you could be number one in the world and all of a sudden nobody cares. And how do you survive during those times? And like, if you look at like these big investors and real estate people and even stockbrokers and all that, they make most of their money during downturn markets. And it's because they had the capital to capture those opportunities, and there's been several times when we were caught, our pants down, just didn't have the capital to do anything. And I've told everybody, I said, look, we're there can be a turn anytime, and we want to be prepared that we can survive it, but also do well in it. And so that's kind of the goal, is just to make sure that we have a solid foundation that can succeed during any hard time as well. It's in the good times that you prepare for the bad, and in the bad times
you need to be preparing these days, right? Everyone needs to be preparing because there's going to be a turn. So
it's inevitable. Everyone knows it, and I talk to my clients every day to figure out, okay, what are you guys anticipating? And also, if there's a downturn in the third, fourth quarter this year, how are you going to operate? Some say, well, we may pause for a year, we may continue on. Others may change their business plan and continue. So we kind of navigate and we understand kind of where we're at. And that goes back to like, do you start staffing up right now? Like, we're at a point right now where we need to staff up on certain projects. But the question is, how big of a jump do we make right now with the impending potential of a downturn? Do you take on this, $250,000 in expenses need to add on, or do you just kind of trim it back? And, so these are the things that we go through and try to figure out those little tricks, So, but yeah, the infrastructure investment is critical. And then listening to the team, if they're not happy, and the other big one is also mistakes. And I tell them all the time, it's like, guys, I make mistakes constantly. So the worst thing you could ever feel is like this embarrassment, or that you're going to get reprimanded for any kind of mistake. I don't care if you make a mistake. In fact, I expect you to make mistakes. It's the only way you're going to learn. And the other part is I don't reprimand at all. It's like, okay, it's been done. So how do we fix it? That's it. There's no point in I don't get angry about any of that stuff. It's like, it's natural. It happens. You forget stuff. Things moving very quickly. So
an opportunity for learning. It's an opportunity for growth. I mean, I've gone through experiences with employees where, make some expensive mistakes, and I'm like, great. All right, we're gonna mine as much wisdom as possible from this mistake. Like, hey, I'm just as responsible for the mistake as you are, and you're more valuable now.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the biggest mistake a lot of owners do is they fire the people right off the bat. Now, I mean, it's one thing if they're doing it maliciously, like a mistake that they plan to do to hurt the company, that's one thing. But if they do an innocent mistake, now they've learned from it. And the other part is, if you don't get upset, they can bring up other mistakes in the future before it becomes bad. Because if they get reprimanded, they're never going to tell you again anything. They're going to brush it under the rug and it's going to be gone. You'd never know about it until it's too late. So I think it's critical that you have this kind of relationship with them where they know that, hey, I can tell you anything. And that's kind of really what we want to foster here. We want to make sure
owners, we don't really want to surround ourselves by yes people. We want people to be like, hey, that sounds really great theoretically, conceptually, in between your ears, but now that it's out here, here's the hit I'm getting from my own intuition, my own experience, because you hire people that are smarter than you, better, or more passionate about some of these things. That you got to be able to retrieve really good raw data to make fast decisions. I mean, your day is loaded with lots of decisions to make.
Yeah, and the same thing with clients. Like when we talk with our clients, it's if anything comes up, we get ahead of it. We over communicate versus like, oh, let's just try to figure everything out and then come back to them with a solution. We'll say, look, here's a solution. Here's an issue that just came right up. We're telling you about it right now. We're trying to find a solution for it, and we'll get back to you as soon as we do. So they appreciate the heads up because they don't want to be blindsided with any of these kind of things. So like, for example, in the beginning of the year, we gave a forecast saying, look, all shipping, logistics, furniture costs, all that kind of stuff is going up 20%. So when you start writing your projections and your pro formas on your financial balance sheets, take into consideration that these things are adjusting to a larger scale than you can possibly imagine, so that they're not blindsided with their numbers when they start doing this stuff. And that actually led us to a lot of early decisions. So like when we have some clients that are looking at acquiring a property, for example, typically they would go out, figure out their analysis, and then they come back to say, okay, this is what we think we're going to spend. So oftentimes those guys don't take into consideration of what everything is moving in the market and how much things are costing and changing. So we've now, we do a lot of the due diligence with them when they look at assets. So when they're actually going to all these different states, we'll actually fly out and meet them at the site, walk the site with them, and then we do a capital estimate of what we think construction, FF&E, and design, and all that stuff will be. So they have a more realistic plug on what that cost will be, so they can put it into their pro forma and go, okay, this is realistic. So like one of the examples, I can't list the client, but they were probably like 600,000 off on where their true idea of what they wanted to design was really going to cost. And they were low 600. So they were able to still make it pencil. But if we didn't tell them this, then we would have to go back and argue now with the banks that they've agreed with, the owners, investors, and everybody else. It's a way more painful process than catching it right in the beginning and saying, look, for all these things, here's what it is. And we have a line item. So they can line out, okay, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. And they can value engineer everything back to a budget that they're comfortable with. And I think that niche is something that a lot of design firms don't do. They can probably do like the furniture calculation, but they don't take into the thought of, okay, what's happening in construction, what the big number is.
And everything's so much more expensive these days. So the customer that's out of date, and here you guys are taking the extra steps to say like, hey, we need to look at these things up front here. Otherwise, this isn't really the best scenario for you.
Yeah. And there's a labor shortage everywhere in construction as well. And so they're paying top dollar for their labor guys, and material shortages all over the place. And now we have these crazy lead times with both materials and with furniture and things that are like 6 months to a year now, which used to be 4 to 6 weeks. And so these are all things that we have to constantly consider as we go through projects and try to get timelines.
Everything's taking way longer to get a hold of materials, and then that changes their story of what they're actually wanting to do. Well, let's go back a little bit in time here at about kind of what your story was and some of the ups and downs of how you arrived at some of these, a lot of the wisdom that you bring forth to this new business. This hard-earned wisdom. School of hard knocks, school of mistakes, school of like, I could do this better, or boy, we really effed up on this.
It was never a business I actually thought I was ever going to get into. So back in high school, when we met, I was, my goal was to go into mechanical engineering. So I wanted to like design race cars and robotic arms and all that kind of stuff. That was my thought back then, because I love building stuff with my hands. And then my dad had started his own business, actually in the 50s, starting in Denmark, designing hotels. And so he had a large firm, and the headquarters were out of San Francisco, as you knew. And so through high school, I was trying to figure out which way I want to go. And obviously my brother was in biomolecular chemistry, so he was definitely not going into architecture. So on the, and
I was just impressed with you at the time that you built your body like Bruce Lee back in the days.
Well, I wasn't quite as big as you though.
But you're pretty shredded, and had anything you went after, you went after with an intelligence and a curiosity of how, you looked at something and you figured out how to reverse engineer it. So
it was fun. And so I remember my dad, one day they pulled me aside. I was working, with my dad part-time at the time, because I was still in high school and stuff. And then, so they called me into the meeting, the CEO, and I thought, oh man, I forgot like an elevator somewhere in one of these hotels or something. I don't know what I was there for. My mom was sitting there. So I thought, oh shit, I'm really in trouble. And then they sat me down and said, look, we're trying to figure out the succession of the company, whether we merge with, at that time it was going to be Hirschbender and Wilson and Ben Severin Design, where we're all going to merge as one big design firm, because we're all in the top who's who of 1, 2, 3 in the world of design.
Yeah, I mean, what are some of the design? I mean, your dad had done some pretty
Yeah, we had done a little over 400 hotels in 65 countries. So Mandarin Orientals, Westons, Sheratons, Raffles, Fairmonts, all the 5 stars. We did all of them all over the world. So we had an office at that time. We had an office in Singapore, Sri Lanka, Hong Kong, China, US. We're everywhere. We had a little over 400 people at our peak. And so at that time, my dad's like, what do you want to do? Do you want to potentially switch to architecture, or do you want to continue down your path of engineering? And actually, I had to think about it. So I spent a couple of weeks thinking about it. And the reason I thought about it was because my dad was never home. He was always traveling for these projects around the world. And at that time, and this is kind of
I remember that because of our house parties.
Yeah.
I was more scared of your parents than my parents. So.
Yeah, there's still one party I remember of you. This guy tried to walk off with my dad's fax machine, and you threw him off the patio. That was pretty funny.
Oh,
yeah.
The fax machine was fine.
Yeah, the fax machine stayed. So we were glad that you were there. So it's interesting that I had to think about it, because at that time I didn't know whether I wanted to do that because of how often he was gone. But what made me change my mind was the desire for us to keep a family legacy. And that kind of goes to why I've got my own thing now, is that whole drive of legacy and keeping family together and all that. So I made the switch, which also meant that I had to change my whole background. Actually, at that time, when I was doing that, I was at a JC. So I was at junior college, and I was going through, a couple of years already of mechanical engineering. So to switch, I had to basically redo all these different credits and units and classes and all that. So it extended my whole college career to make the switch. And I ended up saying, yeah, let's do it. Then I ended up going to, it was just funny, I applied to 2 schools only, Berkeley and Cal Poly. And I got accepted to Berkeley, and I declined Berkeley before even hearing from Cal Poly. And I'm like, and my dad's like, are you sure you want to do this? I'm like, yeah, I'll be fine. And then come to think, I'm like, at that time, and it's still up today, I think Cal Poly is #1 on the West Coast for architecture. And
I got into Cal Poly, and then I ended up going to San Diego State. That was kind of boo-boo.
Yeah. Yeah, it just depends what your major is, right? Yeah. And so I actually drove down to Cal Poly to meet with the president. I'm a kid. I don't understand how the process works. So I just drove down, no appointment, no nothing, 4-hour drive, show up at the dean's office and say, yeah, I'd like to talk to the president of of architecture. She's like, do you have an appointment? I'm like, no. She's like, well, it's about 3 weeks out before you can see him. I'm like, shit. so he actually by chance walks out right then. I was like, excuse me, sir, can I just have 5 minutes of your time?
Oh,
5 minutes. And he's like, all right, 5 minutes. And so I go into his office. We end up talking for 2 hours. He cancels his other meetings. We sit down, really, really nice guy. He hears the life story of kind of where I'm at, what I'm doing, working on hotels worldwide and all this kind of stuff. And I really have a desire for architecture. And then a week later, I got my acceptance. So I don't know if that's part of the reason or if it's, just haphazard. But I made the effort because I was scared shitless that I wasn't going to get in, and I already declined Berkeley. Wow. So my first year at Cal Poly, I had the Berkeley acceptance on the fridge, which is kind of funny. But anyway, so fast forward, joined the firm in 2002, and then basically spent 60-70% of my year traveling. And we did a lot of work in China, Middle East, Indonesia. Most of our work, 98%, was overseas, wasn't in the US. And so I was kind of going all over the place. And then, we went through several recession cycles. So, and that was the frustrating part with hotels, was that anytime a recession or economic change happened, they were the first business to go out. And so that's kind of an indicator when you can see recessions coming, is when hotels stop developing or they start going into short sale, foreclosures, all that. That's the big thing, because the luxury goods is knocked out right away. And then eventually trickles down to single families. So when all of that happened, and then my father got sick in 2012, and then he ended up passing in 2012, in June 2012. So I kept going for several months after that. And then my mom and I just kind of had this hard heart. It's like, is this something you really want to continue doing? And the other part of it is like, I was engaged to someone else at the time, and that didn't work out because I was never home. And that kind of echoed to, me growing up as a kid, asking my mom one time, hey, where's dad? What time's he getting home? He's like, he's been gone for 3 weeks. I had no idea. I just got so used to him just not being around because of the travel. And so it was kind of like one of those self-reflection things going, okay, you know what? I think this is me. I think it's not them. I think it's really me because I'm never around. And it's not fair. And a really big desire of mine was to have a family, have kids, I had all that stuff. So I had to make a life change. And that required, cutting out a big chunk of my heart because that was my dad's business. I didn't want to end it and continue his legacy, but then I knew I wasn't going to have my own life if I didn't. So it was a really tough call, and I had to go around the world. And I actually laid off, at that time, it was about 120 people or so face to face. So each person I laid off personally myself. And that was one of the hardest things I ever had to do in my life. But the benefit of all of that was I found each person a new job, a better job, in fact. So that's like also the proudest moment of my life. Well,
that's huge. Finding other people another job. Hey, we're not going to just like, I'm going to take care of you.
Yeah, and it was interesting because like we had these big hospital projects. We're doing like these 5 in Singapore. It's kind of like you do these high-end private hospitals all the way down to general public hospitals. And so there was this big project we're doing, multi-billion-dollar project, and we could have actually kept the company going if these guys had agreed to like this prepayment program that I was projecting to them. And at that point, they're like, nah. I'm like, all right, well, look, I can shut everything down, or you can hire my entire Singapore office, continue these projects that are worth billions, or you're screwed. And so they ended up taking that deal. And so I found them jobs that actually paid them better, and it worked out better in the long run. And then I went around the rest of the world and did kind of the same thing. So then at that point, I'm like, what am I going to do? And so at that point, I had some opportunities to work with a hotel developer in Hong Kong. I'm like, I don't know if I want to do hotel again. And then Starbucks even was offering to like run their south region, which actually does some of the international stuff. And then I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do that. And then a hotel recruiter reached out to me, and he's like, hey, there's this private development company, property operations company in California. And at that time I was living in Arizona. It was like they're looking for someone to run their design department for new developments and renovations, and they're looking for someone with a hotel background. Are you interested? It's multifamily. I'm like, sure, why not? So I went and interviewed these guys, super nice guys, super innovative, really, really good company, good people, good culture, and learned a lot from them working with these guys in NorCal. And so from those years of working with Prometheus, basically I learned the multifamily world more in depth, and understanding how they operate and all that. And then in 2017, leaving them and starting my own again, I took all of that education and rolled that into kind of what we do now. So now I understand the language and how they think and work. And that kind of brought me in full circle into kind of where we're at today. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And that process of just, there's just so much to digest as you're being, like I said, shifted. Like I thought I was going to be following this legacy path. I thought, I was going to be expanding in these ways. And here you are in this whole segment that's like, I never thought this is what I was going to end up in now and impassioned with. And now it's this, I'm sure you never would have thought you were going to end up this in any way.
And what's funny is you don't really realize how big your network is. And I think the big thing for a lot of people, even coming straight out of high school into college, is build your network. Start getting to meet people, get connected with people, because you never know when these paths will cross again. And so when I started the business, I was telling my wife, look, I'm going to try it for 3 months. If I can get a project within 3 months time, then I'll keep going on this and try it out for another 6 months. So within 2 days, I had a project. And then after that, I kind of grew to a multifamily project. And then I was like, okay, let me see after 6 months, because I need to see am I going to be earning anything from this? Is it worthwhile, or should I just get back into the employee pool? Right. And it just kind of kept growing and growing. So I kept setting these hurdles, and the hurdles kept getting met and exceeded. And so it just kind of grew from there. And then I think once you start building trust with these clients, and it's tricky. It's like, it's not, it's kind of hard to say, but it's like, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And because of the people I met through the years, they gave me these opportunities that open the door, right? So you can have this opportunity. If you screw up the opportunity, you have nothing. But the fact that you have a foot in the door somewhere to at least get an opportunity to try or to show that you can do something, then that's what usually that gets you the big lift over everything. So through the years of working, at Prometheus and meeting people throughout those careers, and then everyone branches off into other companies and they start spreading all over the place. As you know, as you get through these years of work, everyone, friends of yours that have now used to work with you, now work in other companies, and they open up opportunities all over the place. And then it's just a question of, can you execute on those things that you promised? And so that's where it comes down to your business acumen and what you deliver as a product. Is delivering better than everybody else, having good follow-up, having good communication, good relationships with these guys. Nobody wants to work with an a-hole, so if you're a decent person and you're honest, like my dad said, it's like no one could ever take away your education or your character and your name. You can get shot down to nothing, with the economy and with finances and all that, but you can rebuild yourself. If you're a good person and you have the skills, you can always rebuild. So always invest in yourself and invest in people that are good, that can help build something that's right. So
what are some of the best things that you've invested in, along your way outside of your traditional education path? What are some of the things that you've seen as opportunities for growth and expansion and just opportunities to just, Olivier brings more to the table by engaging with these type of outside activities? Like, how have you really honed yourself? Because all these activities with business and with your relationships and your kids, these are all opportunities to grow, to learn, to expand, to wake up to a higher version of yourself, expression, and that's what legacy really is. You think back now to what your dad brought forth and gave to you, an example, and through his work, and what you're doing now. And when it comes to legacy, it's how you're engaging with life and what people get to experience by how you show up uniquely in the world as what's possible. So what are some of the things that you've kind of committed to along your journey that have really helped with your self-mastery practices? Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of like technical things that I've gone into and trying to learn programs and software and like what's best for management, and and you learn that with kind of everything that you're doing. But one of the big pieces was to not fear failure. And so I did a bunch of stuff that just failed miserably throughout my career. So I mean, even during design, I did things on the side trying to start a different business, and then from those things I learned what didn't work. So it's kind of like, if you hire a CEO at some point, we will at some point, the thing that I'm going to be interested in what the CEO has to say is what they failed in. I could care less about their successes. I really don't care. I mean, everyone can succeed in something. It's how do you fail and how do you recover from that failure? Because that's the most important part to me, is like, how did you get back up and how did you fix the problem? Because some people react differently. They can have a failure and they just can't get back up, and they continue to dwell in the past and they can't move forward. My dad had this strong saying. It's like, look, you can't control the past. It's like stress. It's like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do throughout the day, but you don't really move anywhere. So you have to focus on the future. And how do you fix that problem? And to kind of take emotions out of these things and focus on, okay, what makes sense now? How do I move forward from now? So I think these are kind of the more critical things. And the same thing with everyone that we hire. It's like, okay, so what was your biggest mistake and what did you learn from that? Because that's the only way you're going to get better. If you constantly have success, I'm worried about, okay, when things aren't successful, what do? Do you run? Do you hide? Do you come up with solutions? And these are like really important things on growth. And in business, it's either you're growing or you're dying. I think it's,
that's
like
life. You're either growing or dying.
And you're going to be handed, bad stuff, like 2012, my dad dies, 2019, my brother passes away, and that's even during this whole business. And then we have kids in between it, and we have COVID, we have all this. Life is always going to throw challenges at you, but it doesn't mean that you have to become an asshole or be mean to people or not learn from these experiences or not feel emotions and still continue on. It's, like when my dad passed, it's like I was in China and I got the call and I flew right back, and I at least had 2 good days with him, So I mean, you just have to understand that life is super valuable and they could get taken away from you at any second. So if you're not enjoying what you're doing, don't do it. It's not worth it. It's like, do something that you're passionate about, that you enjoy doing, and then surround yourself with people you like being around, because when you're not with your family, you're with them and they become your second family. So if you're not enjoying being in that, or it's toxic or whatever, get out of it. It's not worth drudging through it. So I think, the life lessons I had were working with my dad, listening to his struggles, what he had to go through growing. And anybody else I worked with, I always asked, so what was your biggest struggles? What did you run into? So I was less interested in hearing about their success. Success, great. I love that you have an island over here and you have a Learjet over there. But it's like, how did you get there? Where did you find the failures and how do you grow from that? Because that's the only way you're really going to learn. And then you start learning, you're like, okay, don't do that again. Or at least avoid to do that again. And the other part is like, some of the things you just can't control. At that point, don't stress about it. Only stress about things that you can control. And I'm sure a million people have heard that saying, and it's very true. It's like, there's only certain things we can manage, and there's so much time we have during the day. So focus on things that you can make an impact on and change on. And the other parts, either have someone else manage that part, or just don't stress about it. Just focus on getting through that day and that process, and then deliver on, and then with clients, people are so stressed out about clients going, oh, well, they have this deadline, they have that deadline, but clients change their deadlines all the time too. So if your team and your staff is under tremendous pressure and they can't meet those deadlines, or for whatever reason, then at least go to bat for them and say, okay, go back to the client, say, look, we need to push this out. And oftentimes they're gonna be like, all right, whatever. They just move it on their calendar. And then I think it's the fear of asking, it's like, you'll miss 100% of the shots you don't take, and unless you take a shot, you just don't know what it's going to be, and I think that's true to everything. And it's, without risk, there's no reward, in business, you're always, I guarantee you, I'll probably mess something up today, and I'll mess something up next week, but it's the process, and if you keep to the process, it'll work out, and I think
those are opportunities. There are opportunities right there for, that are loud because they're painful, they're discomforting. They're an opportunity to learn how to articulate with yourself and with the world, what actually needs to happen. So it's just learning, and we don't always have the whole staircase of how things are going to pan out, but I've learned from, like, even I was climbing Devil's Tower, which is the rock from Close Encounters, and I was climbing that a couple weeks ago, and a big part was like, just get the next move, and then you'll be able to see the next grip or the next thing to go through. And it's like, get out and fail hard and miserably and deal with your fears and angst head on. And for a lot of us, we kind of try to self-medicate, self-soothe, and kind of deal with a little bit at a time. And, for me, I put myself in environments that are often very fast, very quick, compounding. And it's like, okay, who am I going to be when shit's hitting the fan? And I think, being in business for yourself, working with all the different personalities and all the different intellects, the different skill sets, you have a thriving environment from which to really test your mettle. If it could just be about that, that's all I got to do today is test my mettle, like going to the gym.
Yeah. And I think it's, when you set goals, it's good, but in business, it's like, it's hard to say, okay, here's where I want to be. This is exactly what I want to do, because it's always going to change. Something new will come up or you want to evolve and all that. So I think it's more about enjoying the journey. And then through the journey and the path, and you go through the journey, you hit these milestones and you hit these certain things that you didn't think you were going to hit right off the bat. And so rather than saying, look, my goal in the company is, look, just deliver really high quality product, follow up with the clients, make their life easier. And then we'll naturally grow from there, because word will come out and people will hear more about this and working with us and what it's like to work with us, rather than focusing on, okay, I want to be the next Gensler or HOK or SOM or any of these massive firms. It's like, rather than doing that, I'd rather just focus on the people, understanding the infrastructure, understanding how we work better and make our lives easier. Because it's like, do you live to work or do you work to live? And so hopefully we're working to live. And so we have this good life and work balance. that we're not just, working 100-hour days, that we're actually doing stuff and we're doing really cool stuff and we actually have a balance, because the life is outside of work. But enjoying what we do as work is just the added strawberry on the top. So I think I try not to focus too much on where my end game is. I'd love to, get into more development and do my own projects. And so these are goals and directions of where I want to go. But to say I'm going to be this and I'm going to be that, it's too solid, because this is much more fluid, and you kind of have to go with where an economies change or things change, or a circumstance or opportunities come up. You can't just be so rigid. You have to be fluid to a certain point. So it's enjoying kind of like the path. Like, Parnas and I joke all the time, like, oh, well, we're talking about only doing 5 people in the company. Now we're like approaching 10. What's next? 20? So it keeps growing, and we just don't know where the true final answer will be. But as long as it makes sense and it's in the design of where we want to go, that we're not getting too big to where we can't control things and we don't have that personal touch anymore with our clients. These are things that we find as like pillars to our companies, is being approachable. And that's, I think, what clients like from us, is that they can pick up a call, they can text me, and we have immediate answers. And it's not just like, oh, you go to some operator somewhere else and 2 weeks later you get some feedback. And so I think we don't want to lose that touch.
Fine line, that growth curve. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And it's become too automated. Everything's now, you got to call and you got to wait, and it's just way too automated. And I don't like that as much as just the old school of, like, you could call someone and you get a human being, you can talk to them, you get some answers. And I think our clients deserve that. On the flip side, we also want the same thing from them, to where we can approach them and talk to them openly about stuff. And again, that comes down to picking your clients that you want to work with. So we've had a lot of luck and success with finding good clients, genuine people, and we've had a lot of growth with that. And we also understand that those are opportunities that could easily be taken from us if we don't deliver on our part. So we're constantly trying to work on ourselves. We're never satisfied with just the status quo. So we're trying to always improve our skills. What else can we deliver? What can we do better? How do we do it more efficiently so we can gain time back to do other things? So these are all things that we're constantly going over. And I think as an owner, it's your job to make sure that you bring in, like in the design world, interesting projects, but clients that are fun to work with, that aren't going to berate your staff. But also making sure that you understand that you work for your staff. They don't have any true incentive to have to stick around and bust their butt on you day in, day out. You've got to give something that makes it interesting for them. And that's just a choice. You either choose to do a business or work for someone else.
But having a business requires, what I'm getting a big hit from you is, and from my own experience, is experience. It's the experience you give everybody who comes in contact with this business concoction. So this business that's been put together is about creating experience for yourself, and having the business. How is it going to provide you the balanced life? How is it going to provide that the platform from which your employees grow, and then the platform from which you can have an experience and engagement of your client that's unlike anywhere else in the industry, that is more like, hey, we care and we want to get it right, and we are coming in with our ears open. We don't know everything, and so we're going to remain curious and keep coming up with our next iteration of how to do better business as we go through the growing pains, of like, hey, it's time to grow some more, expand some more, but how do we not lose those qualities that got us here?
Yeah, exactly. And it's doing the extra. I mean, like we do things that's not part of our contract. We do things because we know it'll help them, and it'll make it easier for them to either make decisions or to get through the process easier. Because at the end of the day, we look at it as teamwork. We're all driving to get the same project done and the same product done at the highest quality and level. So if there's anything we can do that's not going to, break our backs to do it, we'll do our best to make sure that it carries that baton across the finish line.
Well, I've taken a ton of notes today, and I'm sure our audience who's listening has as well. How would folks get a hold of you? What would be the best route to look you guys up online and
get educated?
Our
website, it's Severin GRP for our group, so severingrp.com. We have an email at info@severingrp.com. Sorry. So I think those are probably the easiest ways.
Sure.
We haven't updated our website ever because we're just slammed. But yeah, I mean, that's an easy way to get a hold of us. We're in Burlingame and kind of have people spread across the US. So yeah, if there's any questions they have, I mean, I'm happy to answer them, even if it's just life questions. So
Great.
whether or not you want to get in the design business or not. So yeah.
I know they can reach out to you and have that conversation with you. And I'm just so appreciative of having the time today with you, Olivier, to sit down and have a conversation just about life, about business, about just what are you committed to when it comes to no matter what business you're in. You committed to your people that it's just not, I've got this idea, it'll be really great and it should make some good money for me and for everybody involved, or we can create some really great products and services. But it really, from what I've heard echoed throughout the conversation today, has been, you've got this vehicle, it's an opportunity of service. And in that opportunity of service, what is the highest service that you can show up? What are all the different things that you should consider in this particular type of business that you're engaging with on how you're going to serve yourself and others at the highest level, and be able to articulate that message to why it would be great to do business with us or come on board our team. Is at the heart of doing business. We could have been talking about the whole technical side of architecture and all the lists on cost of goods these days, but the main piece that I'm hearing from you and what's been learned through working for other agencies and design and what's been bestowed from your father, that it's, when we think of legacy, it's are you clear with how you want to show up in the world and have a positive impact in those you're fortunate enough to be able to engage with and share just these vital ingredients of quality life.
Yeah, and that was kind of instilled with my dad too. Is like, at the end of the day, whoever joins us, if they decide to leave, at least they leave as a better person. If they've taken on some information, if there's anything I can share with them that I've gone through, that's the hard points in my life that can possibly save them from having to go through those hard points as well. I'm glad to share that knowledge, because I had people who were able to share that with me. Of course, I still did things on the stupid side, but at least I learned. And that's the biggest point. It's like having people to share things with and experiences with, and build a cool future together. That's where it's all about. It's like, can we do cool stuff together and enjoy doing it? Enjoy the path. Instead of always what's the destination, what's next. It's like, how about today? Let's enjoy today. Let's get through today. Because anything that I've learned from these years, and as you know, it's like when you lose loved ones, tomorrow's not guaranteed. So you have to enjoy the day, enjoy everything, because that's the most critical part.
Well, I really enjoyed today spending time hanging out with you, brother. And
been too long.
It's been too long. And well, we're gonna do this again. We'll probably invite you back again for another podcast here soon. And just want to thank everybody else out there for listening in, and stay tuned for the next episode. And we'll see you guys soon. So thank you, brother. Okay, bye-bye, everybody.